Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to evaluate trig functions with these special angles that are on the unit circle. Okay, and what we want to try to be able to do is get to the point where we don't need to have the picture of the unit circle in front of us to be able to do this. Okay, so even though if you look at it, it looks like there's a lot of stuff to memorize right there, right? Okay, but remember, how many things do we need to memorize to get this right? 3 numbers. Okay, all you need is 3 numbers to get this right. Okay, you need to make sure you have in your mind 1/2, radical 3 over 2, and radical 2 over 2. Okay, so right now, if I told you to find, I'm gonna work in degrees right now, and then we're gonna switch to radians. So if I just told you to find, let's say I want the cosine of, let's say, 135 degrees. Okay, so if I want the cosine of 135, here's what I would do. I would draw myself a unit circle. Okay, keep in mind I'm going to do this with no cheat sheet, with no calculator. I need to be able to find the cosine of 135, and when we get done with this, hopefully we can do that within 3 or 4 seconds. Alright, so that's our goal. So first of all, your main job here is to figure out first, where is this on the unit circle? Where is 135? Well, from the positive x we go 90, 180, halfway between 90 and 180 is 135. It's right there. Okay, so it's a 45 equivalent. We need to recognize it's right in the middle, right? 45 is in the middle here. Here's our 45. Here's our 135, and we want the cosine of that. Well, as soon as we recognize that it's a cosine, or excuse me, that it's a 135 that's related to 45, okay, what's the only numerical answer that this could possibly be? Square root of 2 over 2. And what's our only other job we got to figure out then is whether it's what? Positive or negative. And since it's cosine, cosine is the x, sine is the y. So x on the second quadrant is negative or positive? It's negative. So there we go, we're done. Okay? So the key issue is find the angle, okay, and then decide whether the value is positive or negative. And then of course we need to know the right value. And if it's any relation to 45, okay, there's never any doubt. Okay? So keep in mind, had this tangent or secant or cosecant or cotangent, then the best strategy would be to find the sine and cosine first, and then use whichever one, you know, is the appropriate one to find, like I said, either the tangent or the cosecant or whatever. Okay. All right. So cosine of 35. How about this one? What if I said I want the sine of, let's say, 330 degrees? Okay. All right. 330 degrees. If I count, and watch this, when I count by 30s, here's how I'm going to make my unit circle. Okay, I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to count 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, 330, and then of course back to 360 here. So this is 0 or 360. So in order to make your own unit circle when you need to, okay, all you need to do is be able to count by 30s. Or also count by 45s. 45, 90, 135, 180, 225, 270, 315, 360. Fair enough? So at this point, as long as you can count by 30 and by 45, you should be able to make your own unit circle very quickly. True? Which allows you to find the angle here. So here's my angle. Here's the angle in question, 330. Okay? And what you want to look at here then is which answer is this going to be? Well, we know there's only 2 choices. It's either a half or it's radical 3 over 2. True? Okay. It's a multiple of 30, so therefore it's either got to be a half or it's got to be radical 3 over 2. So how do we decide? Well, let's look at the position of this one. Okay, if we were to get to that point from the origin, we'd go x, y. True? And which one do we want? We want the y, so keep that in mind. And if you look at that picture, we're going to go a long distance and a short distance. Okay, and we want the short distance. So the question is, out of 1/2 or radical 3 over 2, okay, which one's bigger? Well, if you can't figure it out in your head, you know what 1/2 is 0.5. If I were to do radical 3 over 2, we already know the answer to it, but just to illustrate once again, it's 0.86. Which one's bigger? Yeah, this one's bigger. Okay, 1/2 is 0.5, and this is 0.866. This is the bigger one. So if we're going to again travel from here to that point, going along the x-axis and then straight down, okay, that length right there is definitely bigger than that length right there, isn't it? So we want the short leg, which would produce the smaller value, and so therefore the answer is 1/2. And of course we went down in terms of y to get that, so the answer actually is -1/2. Okay. Again, you can verify that with your calculator also. All right. So again, find that, and at that particular position, okay, this coordinate right here has a big X and a small y. Fair enough? So big X, small y. And since sine is the y, we take the smaller one. All right, let's look at another. Let's say if I do cosine this time of, let's say, -120. Okay. So -120, I'm just going to keep my same unit circle here. If I go 30, 60, 90, 120, there I am right there at that position. Okay, find the position that we're at. Okay, and then if I'm going to go to that spot, I'm going to go over and down. Okay, the question is, which is longer, the over or the down in that case? And the down is longer, so right there, that's radical 3/2, and that's 1/2 then, right? Okay, and we want the cosine, so which one is the cosine? The x, the horizontal direction, or the vertical direction? Remember, the cosine is the x, so this would be 1/2. Keep in mind it's 1/2, except for we're in the third quadrant, so it would actually be going left, so it would actually be -1/2 then, wouldn't it? Okay, questions so far? Alright, let's take a look at some problems that involve radians. I'm going to redo my unit circle. Okay, now watch how I create this unit circle, because this is what you're going to want to do whenever you have to do this. Okay, make yourself a unit circle. Okay. Alright, and if you're going to produce this circle with radian measure, here's what you need to be able to do. You need to recognize the starting point is 0 radians, and then the first angle here, the first special angle, is going to be pi/6. Because pi/6 is the same as 30 degrees. Okay. Now I'm going to skip the pi/4s right now. I'm just going to do the pi/6s and the pi/3s. Okay. Now watch how I do this though, because you're going to want to be able to reproduce this the same way in order to use it. Okay. So I'm going to go pi/6. The next mark is going to be 2 pi/6. But what is 2 pi/6? It's pi/3. Then the top mark is going to be 3 pi/6, which is pi/2. 3 pi/6 reduces to that. The next one is going to be 4 pi/6. Okay, so if you can count, you can get this right. Okay, it's always going to be over it's always going to be pi/6. 1 pi/6, 2 pi/6, 3 pi/6, and you can write them in there like that and then reduce them later if you want to. It's up to you. Okay, or you can reduce them as you go. But if this is 4 pi/6, that's really 2 pi/3. 5 pi/6 doesn't reduce. 6 pi/6 is really pi, halfway around the circle. Then we got 7 pi/6. 8 pi/6 reduces to 4 pi/3. 9 pi/6 reduces to 3 pi/2. Okay, 1.5 pi. 3/4 of the way around the circle at this point. And again, this was 9 pi/6. Then we have 10 pi/6, which reduced to 5 pi/3. And then we have 11 pi/6. And then we're back to 12 pi/6, and what is 12 pi/6 the same as? 2 pi. Okay. So as long as you can count and recognize that you got to count by pi/6, 1 pi/6, 2 pi/6, 3 pi/6, and so on. Okay, then you can produce this circle anytime you want to. Okay, and you're going to need to, because if I told you right now to find me the sine of, let's say, 4 pi/3, okay, your main issue is you need to figure out where is 4 pi/3 located. Fair enough. So if you find 4 pi/3, there it is right there. Okay. Again, it's closer to the y-axis, so that means it's going to have a short x, long y, short x, long y, 1/2, radical 3/2 would be the coordinates of that point, because it's got a short x and a long y. Okay. And so which one of these are we going to choose for sine? Sine is the x or sine is the y? Sine's the y. So the answer here is radical 3/2, and the only other thing we got to make sure we're careful with is the sign on this. Okay, the sign is going down, so it's got to be negative. Okay, so as long as we can locate that angle, okay, then we can find that trig function for it. Okay. Let's try another one. How about the cosine of, let's say, -5 pi/6? So if I have to find the cosine of negative 5 pi over 6, okay, watch my count here. Again, we're going to start here. We're going to go clockwise this time. So we're at negative 5 over 6, negative 2 pi over 6, negative 3 pi over 6, negative 4 pi over 6, negative 5 pi over 6. So we're right here. This is not only 7 pi over 6, but it's negative 5 pi over 6 also. Those two are coterminal. Okay. So looking at that, if I wanted to get to that point, I'd have to go long x, short y. So long x, short y, knowing that I want the x and that it's long, makes the answer once again radical 3 over 2. And since we're going left for the third quadrant, then that makes the answer negative. Okay. Questions so far? Alright, so again, the key to getting this right is to make sure that we can produce this unit circle. Okay. Now, let's finish up with one more here. If I wanted to do, let's say, sine of 315, whoops, let's say that backwards. Let's say sine of 7 pi over 4, keep it in radians here. 7 pi over 4 doesn't have a 3 or a 6 underneath it, so that's not on my list right now. But it does have a 4 underneath it, and if I count by pi over 4s, I'm going to fill in those blanks now. Remember, the middle one is pi over 4, that's the same as 45. Top is 2 pi over 4. This quadrant has a 3 pi over 4. 4 pi over 4 is pi again. 5 pi over 4 is here in the middle of those two. And then 7 pi over 4 is here because, again, 3 pi over 2 is 6 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4. And 8 pi over 4, we're back to 2 pi. So 7 pi over 4 is right here. Okay, recognize that it's related to pi over 4, so what's the only number this can possibly be? Square root of 2 over 2. Okay, and then your only issue is to figure out whether it's positive or negative. Now, we want the sign, which is the y-coordinate, so if we're at this position, the y-coordinate here would be positive or negative? It would be negative. So we get negative radical 2 over 2. And that's it. Questions? All right. So in your homework today, ultimately, what we want to get to is be able to handle any of these problems I used as examples, okay, and be able to quickly find where the angle is located, okay, and then figure out which coordinate is the correct answer. And remember, there's only 3 values you need to have memorized here. Now remember, keep in mind that if you're given something other than sine or cosine to find, okay, you'll want to find the sine and cosine first and then use whichever one is appropriate if you need to find secant, cosecant, tangent, cotangent. Okay?